Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Carrie Ann Williams. I'm a psychiatrist practicing here in Massachusetts, and this is a show that's all about everything related to mental health in the Black community. So if you have any questions or comments throughout the show at any time, just drop it in the comment section. I'll be able to see that and respond if I need to. So today I'm talking about healing from past relationships. And I did have a guest scheduled today, Janelle, but she had an emergency come up today, and so she's not going to be able to join me. So I'll have a bit of a shorter show today, but I wanted to just share some of my thoughts about healing from past relationships. And I wanted to invite you also to share some of your tips for healing from past relationships. So if you have any tips throughout the show, just drop them in the comment section. I'll be able to see them even after the show has aired. So first, I wanted to start with some thoughts about healing from past relationships. The first thought is it's okay to grieve the loss of past relationships. It's okay to grieve the loss of past relationships. Sometimes people around you will tell you to forget about that person, but really you have to do it at your own pace. You can't just forget about the other person. You need to decide for yourself what that point is that you should feel like you should be able to move on. So for some people, they feel like it's a certain number of months or whatnot. What is that point where you think it's reasonable for you to move on? The second thought is it is important to allow yourself to feel the emotions of losing the relationship. Give yourself that time to process and feel. Sometimes in an effort to be strong, we can suppress our true feelings of grief and hurt. We try to suppress them. We try to artificially move on. And when you try to suppress feelings like that, those suppressed feelings don't really go away and they don't really get processed. So they're still there and they will pop up again in the future at times and in ways that you may not want. So allow yourself to feel the emotions and process them. The third thought is if you're angry, be honest with yourself about the anger that you're feeling and strive to manage how that anger is expressed. I think if you try to tell yourself, oh, I'm not angry, but you really are, the anger is going to come out in different ways and you'll have less control over it because you're in denial. So be honest with yourself. It's so tempting to express anger in unproductive ways. So be very mindful of, for example, projecting your anger onto other people who have nothing to do with your past relationship, or projecting your anger onto the person in your new relationship, or even continuing to project anger onto the person who left you, because you know that doesn't change anything, right? It doesn't make you heal, and it rarely prevents the person who left you from moving on with their own lives. Projecting anger doesn't really prevent them from moving on with their lives. The fourth thought that I wanted to share is that it is normal to think about the person a lot initially. So don't be hard on yourself if you think about that person a lot for the first several months. You will eventually get to a point where you think about them less and less. And when you finally get to that point where you think about them less, you're going to find that there's going to be certain things that remind you of the person. So, for example, if you're in a new relationship and you get in an argument, sometimes that can trigger thoughts of past relationships. Or if you're feeling lonely or feeling upset, your mind may drift to the old relationship that you had. And sometimes these can be a sign that you're actually not really free from that past relationship. It still keeps kind of coming up in these moments. And then I want to talk about this fifth thought and spend some time on it. It is be intentional about making a healing plan. Be intentional about making a healing plan. So I want you to think, what helps you to heal? What helps you to heal? So let's talk about that. The first thing I wanted to mention is pausing. Pause. Some people find it helpful to pause and do an honest self-evaluation. Be honest with yourself about what went wrong. What went wrong? Was that person truly the right person for you? Or was it never really meant to work out? Was that person right about something that you did that was wrong? Maybe there's something you did that made the relationship difficult, and the other person is right about that. Were there red flags that you ignored or you kind of rationalized away? Sometimes even when you know the relationship was never going to work out, it can still hurt to lose the relationship. So I just want to acknowledge that even when you know it's not going to work out, sometimes it still hurts to lose it. Also, no matter what the situation was, there's always something that you can take accountability for. So even if the other person was wrong and you were right or whatnot, there's always something that you can take accountability for and that you can change in the future. So the second thing I want to talk about with what helps you to heal is to diversify your life. Diversify your life. Now, is your life revolving around dating and relationships? If so, then you need to work on being at peace, whether or not you're in a relationship. You need to work on finding more than one fulfilling thing in your life. Being dependent on relationships to find identity and fulfillment is a very vulnerable place. You have to have other things going on for you, things that you can find fulfillment in, so that if some other person comes up to you that's really a bad prospect, it's easy for you to say no because you don't feel like you need to be in a relationship. You can choose. The next thing in helping you to heal is to consider a therapist. Consider a therapist, especially if your past relationship was one that you would consider to be toxic. This means that your previous partner brought out the worst in you, okay? It's difficult to heal from emotional and psychological abuse alone. It's very difficult to heal from that by yourself. And you can't put it on your next partner to try to help you heal from a previous emotional abusive relationship. It's better to work with a therapist, even if it's temporary, even if it's just for a year, talk about it, come up with some strategies to come out of that abusive relationship, and kind of thinking about what's going to happen for you, what are you going to do for your new relationship. The other thing with helping you to heal is to come to terms with forgiveness. Come to terms with forgiveness. Holding on to past hurts frequently leads to bitterness. And bitterness is the polar opposite of forgiveness. And bitterness is destructive, okay? So emotional bitterness is painful and it is destructive emotionally, psychologically, and even physically. Forgiveness is also painful, but it leads to emotional freedom. So you can choose a type of pain that you want to have. The pain of bitterness or the pain of forgiveness. Now, forgiveness also involves acceptance. And acceptance is difficult for a lot of us, but acceptance is also very freeing. So the next thing that I want to mention with helping yourself to heal is what are your healthy coping habits? What are your healthy coping habits? You know what they are already because you know yourself best. So be intentional about scheduling time for your healthy coping habits. Is it a hobby? Is it exercise? Is it meeting with friends? Is it traveling? You can take a day trip, an overnight trip. You can take a week-long trip. You can stay local to save money, or you can travel halfway across the world if you have the means. Find your healthy coping strategy and schedule it. Okay. Then the next thing about healing is to let go of the idea of closure. Let go of the idea of closure. I had a previous guest on the show. Her name was Janice Brownhill, and she spoke about how this idea of closure is overvalued. In particular, women tend to seek closure. They're always looking for some kind of final conversation or some kind of apology. And the truth is that closure is a bit overrated, and it often never really occurs. And closure requires, depending on the other person, for an emotional resolution, which a broken relationship can't really give you. So, whereas some people have said that they found closure to be helpful, it's a very difficult thing for people to strive for universally. You can't really rely on closure as a means for achieving emotional healing. And then the other thought I had about healing is redefine failure. Redefine failure. One of the things that tends to nag us about past relationships is the idea that we failed. We failed. I mean, did you really? Did you really fail? I believe that one of the pathways to healing is to think carefully about your definition of failure. One of the things that our society and our culture teaches us is that success is about achieving a specific goal. The definition is so narrow. So if a particular season in your life ends, we think of that ending as a failure. But is it? What is your definition of a successful relationship experience? A successful relationship experience. What we know, of course, is a generalization, just a general kind of thing, is that men and women have different definitions of what a successful relationship experience is. And we know that perspective is going to be really, really important in helping you heal. So your perspective about what it means to fail or what it means to have a successful relationship experience can help you in your process of healing. It's changing your mindset. Okay. So now, when you determine that you're ready to move on, or, for example, if you're in a new relationship, here are some things to think about. Here are some things to think about. One is social media. Are you still connected to them on social media? Are you still friends with them? Are you still following them? Are you looking at their posts? How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? Did you know that social media has been proven to make people feel more depressed? I think this is one of the many reasons why social media can cause people to feel depressed. If you're no longer in a relationship, you're hurt, and you're still looking at pictures of them looking really happy without you, that can hinder healing. So if you know that that's getting in the way of your healing, really think about what you want to do about it. Okay, I can't answer the question for you. I can't tell you to block people, but really think about how you're going to manage the social media issue, because that can hinder your healing. Other items. Are there other items that you have around you that remind you of the person? How do you feel every time you see these items? Okay. If it makes you think of them every time you see it, if it makes you feel down every time you see it, if it takes you away from thinking about the new person that you're with every time you see it, then you maybe have to make a decision. Do you want to keep living like that? Do you want to keep this item in your life? Is it hindering your healing? If you're in a new relationship, do you want to keep holding on to items from a past relationship that keeps transporting your mind into the past and into past hurts? Now, of course, it can be complicated if your past relationship was a past marriage. If you have, again, like a co-parenting situation, or if you were married to someone for a long time and a lot of things you purchased together. So that becomes a bit complicated, but just think about it. Think about and decide for yourself what things you can let go of and what things you can't. Do what's reasonable for your situation. The other thing, if you're ready to move on, stop talking about your past relationship. Stop talking about it. Okay. One of the signs that you have not healed from a past relationship is that you're still talking about it. You keep bringing it up. So don't keep bashing the person when you talk to your friends. Don't bring the person up when you're talking to your new partner. Recognize that if you're continuing to talk about that past relationship, if you're talking about that person, you're just fueling the hurt. You're just kind of pouring gasoline on the flame. And you're continuing to breathe life into something that should be dead, right? So if a past relationship is gone, the relationship is dead, every time you talk about it, you're breathing life into something that really should be dead. So stop talking about it. Are you still communicating with the person from the past relationship? That's a question for you. Are you still communicating with them? Even though you're in a new relationship, are you still communicating with a person from a past relationship on a regular basis? How's that working out for you? If your goal is to heal from that past relationship, then continuing to reignite connection to that person can hinder your ability to heal. Now, again, if you're co-parenting, then you have no choice but to continue regular communication. That's extremely complicated. No simple answer for that, but I can maybe in this situation reiterate the concept of forgiveness, because in this case you're going to have to keep talking to this person. So how can you really deal with the deep feelings of hurt? You may have to tap into the very difficult work of forgiveness, because forgiveness can take you a far way. And what it does, particularly if you work on forgiving yourself for the things that you made mistakes for, and also forgiving the other person, it can take away the sting of the blame and the shame, and can help to facilitate peace. But it is the most difficult thing to do. It's the biggest ask, is to forgive. The other thing with moving on is thinking about this idea of defensiveness. Now, sometimes when we go through, like a bad breakup or past relationship, we tell ourselves we will never again be taken advantage of. Never again. We feel this need to gain control of the situation, protect ourselves at all costs. Never going to be made a fool of again. And what that leads to is defensiveness. And then what happens is that the hurts of the past relationship get projected onto the new relationship. So for example, you may find yourself setting overly strict boundaries with them, which then makes them feel emotionally distant. They feel like they can't get close to you emotionally. And then that could cause you to lose a relationship because you're just so kind of sensitized to what happened in the past that now this new person can't even get close to you. So be really mindful of defensiveness. And then there's mistrust. There's a lot that can be said about trust versus mistrust. But this is definitely one of those things that tend to follow a lost relationship, particularly if you were blindsided by the loss of the relationship. So one of the signs that you have not healed from a past relationship is that you find it very difficult to trust your new partner. You're worried that they're lying to you. You're worried that they're hiding something from you. You need to know where they are at all times. You need to check their phone. Listen, your partner either is or is not trustworthy. Okay? Either they are trustworthy or they're not trustworthy. If they are not trustworthy, then why are you in a relationship with somebody who's not trustworthy? Maybe you need to think about that, because if they're not trustworthy, it's going to be a very painful relationship and it might not last. But if your partner is trustworthy, if you've deemed them to be a trustworthy person, but you're still having trouble with trusting them, then you need to work on yourself to determine why it's difficult for you to trust somebody that you otherwise think of as a generally trustworthy person. Okay, because that lack of trust can cause you to lose someone that you genuinely love. So the other thing I wanted to mention about healing is that sometimes healing is about more than just the past relationship. Sometimes the hurt is deeper and it's actually existed before your past relationship. So for example, you may have unresolved hurts from your childhood that you've been bringing into your relationships. And that's sometimes a contributing factor to unsuccessful relationships. So in this situation, you will most definitely need to meet with a professional to help you work through those deeper hurts, those deeper things. Otherwise, you may continue the pattern of bringing old hurts into new relationships. If you're only thinking that it's that person that's the problem, then you're not going to fully be able to heal, because there may be more to the story, and you need to work on that. So what happens if you don't heal? What happens if you kind of just keep going and say, hey, I'm just going to suppress everything, kind of deny everything, and just move forward? Well, there's a lot of things that could happen, but I think some of the more concerning things is that you can end up you can actually end up hurting the person you're in a relationship with. So if you have a lot of defensiveness and mistrust and other things, you can, without even meaning to, you can actually become emotionally abusive to a new partner. So how does that happen? Well, if you're defensive, mistrustful, and worried and all these other things, you can become very critical of your partner. They can never do anything right. They just can never get things right. You can project anger onto them from a past relationship. You're irritable. They can never make you happy. You can also place a lot of burden and responsibility on them to make up for what happened in the past relationship. And that's unfair. And they can't make up for what happened in your past relationship. And you may actually not even realize that you're punishing them for things. So you're punishing them when they do things that you don't like. You're kind of punishing them when they do things that you can't control. You withhold things from them. You give them the silent treatment. You speak poorly about them in front of other people. Those are all things that are coming from past hurts and can cause relationships to break down and can cause you to be the person hurting your partner. The other thing that can happen, unfortunately, is this scenario. I'm going to kind of just paint the scenario for you. It's a scenario where the person who was in an abusive relationship, and in that abusive relationship, they were made to feel weak and to feel small. Then they got out of that relationship. They're free from the relationship. And then they start a new relationship with someone who wasn't abusive, someone who was the opposite. They were kind and they were loving. Now, the person who was abused and made to feel small and weak, they developed a resentment for being made to feel small. They developed anger and resentment about being made to feel weak. And so what they do in the new relationship with a person who's kind and loving is that they resolve that in order to never feel abused again, that they're going to exert control and dominance, and they end up becoming abusive themselves because they're trying to defend against ever being abused by then becoming the controlling and domineering one. Basically, they need to feel powerful. Otherwise, they will worry that they're going to be abused. It's a very complex situation. And that can occur when you haven't really healed from a past relationship. And it's so complex that I would recommend working with a professional. That's the kind of thing that's very, very difficult to heal from on your own. Got to work with a professional. So then the other question that I wanted to kind of bring up is this idea of, can you heal 100% before starting a new relationship? Because sometimes you read certain things and they'll say, well, don't enter a new relationship unless you're 100% healed from a past one. And it sounds so like idealistic, like heal 100% before you go into a new relationship. But here's what I would say about that situation. There are certain things that you need to work on by yourself. And then there are certain things that you can only work through in the context of a relationship. So by yourself, or with a therapist, you can do things like reviewing on past relationships, reflecting on a past relationship, determining what went wrong, and doing a deeper dive into your own personal characteristics. On your own, you can work on your self-identity, you can work on healthy habits, you can work on your career. There's so much that you can do on your own to build yourself up, work on your health. There's all these things. But one of the most important things that can happen in relationships is what I would call an attachment reaction. So this is playing out when someone has a very close attachment bond to another person. This is different from friendships. Romantic relationships have more power to bring out anger and sadness and desperation because it's a different type of psychological experience. And when you're alone, you can't really work through those aspects of your own psychology. You can do it theoretically. You can meet with a therapist. You can do role play where you try to think through what would I say if this happened and so on. But it's very different when you're in the moment and those emotions rise up. So healing, I would say, has two parts to it. There is a very large part that you can work on before you enter the new relationship. And it's very, very crucial for you to do that work. But there are going to be some aspects that you will have to work on during your new relationship. So what that might look like is, at the beginning, you kind of work on your identity and these sorts of things and not being dependent on relationships and so on. But then after you start a new relationship, it may be helpful for you to get couples counseling. And I've had a couples counselor on the show before, and they actually recommend premarital counseling. In fact, they recommended premarital counseling, which is where if you're considering getting engaged, you have counseling before even getting engaged. What that does is it helps to prevent broken engagements. So for example, if you're carrying a lot of hurts from the past, from past relationships, some experts would suggest getting counseling before deciding to get engaged so that you can kind of figure out, are these problems that we can work through reasonably, or are they kind of unresolvable problems? And so, kind of save yourself the hurt of having to get engaged and then having a broken engagement. So there's room for counseling all along the way. There's the premarital counseling, there's premarital, and then of course there's like marriage counseling. So the common theme there is counseling. So guys, overall, this is a very oversimplified summarization of things to think about when healing from past relationships. There's a lot more detail to it. Obviously, the actual work itself can be really difficult, very painful, but very necessary. I'm a big proponent of doing the painful work of forgiveness. Because I think forgiveness has the power to help us to be able to still, if we need to, interact with that person without having the heaviness of the hurt. And it can also help us to really feel free. So we don't feel a need to always talk about the person. We're not always blaming them and so on. So that would be some of my 2 cents, I guess. So again, if you have any comments or any things that tips you want to add about healing from past relationships, definitely feel free to drop in the comment box and I'll be able to get them after the show. This was kind of a shorter show. As I said earlier, my guest Janelle, she had a family emergency today, and so she was not able to join me. But next week, guys, I'm going to be on the island of positivity with Dr. Onika Williams. She's going to be here to talk about her new book. It's called Not Today Negativity. It's available on Amazon. So you don't want to miss my show next week with Dr. Onika Williams. So log in next week, Sunday at 1 p.m. on Black Mental Health Matters. So talk to you then. Bye.